am inserting this little video clip right before you get involved with the video because this recipe has turned out to be, from my perspective, a big fat fail. So if you're not wanting to watch the whole video because at the end it's going to be a fail, boy, do I understand. So just to let you know, this turned out to be a fail, but plunge forward if you want to see the whole story, and thank you if you do. Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're getting lots of new subscribers, which just really excites us. And thank you so much for joining our adventures. We have a true learning community on this channel, and I want to thank all of you who have commented on our most recent video on our first spring planting in the greenhouse. I invited all of you to share what soil amendments you use to prepare your spring gardens. And wow, we had a wonderful response to that, and so many different brands of soil amendment things that I had never even heard of before. So it was really fun to read what some of you use in your own gardens all over the country. So thank you so much for responding, and then for responding to each other too as well. That was fun. Just a quick update on our bread book. I turned it over to my editor, who is also the cameraman. Jim is a wonderful editor. He has edited all of my books, my professional papers. When we were both in our PhD programs, he edited my dissertation. So I really appreciate his work. So he has it, and I still have a few days' work left to do on the back side where the nutrition information is on the 15 different grains that I'm showing. So it will be ready by the end of this month, and I'm very excited to release this book. I've really put a lot of effort in. It's over 100 pages and has lots of recipes and lots of explanations, which will help those of you that are new to bread making. So that is forthcoming. Now, speaking of bread making, I've been teaching local classes here, and people come to our home. I'm teaching a series of 3 classes, and it is for people in our church and people in our local community, and I've had a great response. Well, in just a few days, I'm going to be teaching the sourdough class, and so here's what I have ready for that. I'm going to send everyone home with a sourdough starter, which means I have to really have a lot of starters ready. And so I fed these late yesterday afternoon, and I thought, what a perfect time for us, now that these are all fed and ready to go, for us to do a sourdough loaf in the bread maker. Now, I have not used this Cuisinart compact bread maker for sourdough yet. The recipe is very simple. It does call for yeast, and I kind of don't like to put yeast in sourdough. I like for the sourdough to be the only leaven, but I'm going to be following their recipe. In times where the grid is down and society is very different, we may not have access to yeast, and so a sourdough recipe that calls for yeast could be SOL. So in our book, in our new book, I do have a sourdough recipe that uses no yeast. It takes a longer time, but that's what happens when you are using sourdough leaven. Well, let's get started on what we're going to be doing today. So here is our bread pan. I'm going to move these out of the way so you can see better. And the print is so tiny in this recipe book, and this is the recipe book that came with my Cuisinart. We add 3 tablespoons, and we have to add it in the order that it's stated in the recipe. 3 tablespoons of cool water. The paddle is in place. 1 teaspoon of sugar and a teaspoon and a half of salt. 2 cups of sourdough starter. Now, when you measure sourdough starter, you punch it down. Knock the air out of it. And now we're just going to see if we've got 2 cups here. I may have to get into one of the other jars. I have plenty, plus I still have time that if I need more, I can make more. It is really goopy, gooey stuff. I don't make a strong sourdough, a tangy sourdough. I prefer just to use sourdough as the leaven rather than giving it that flavor. It's easy to convert leaven like this. I'm using the French word levain. Yep, I'm a little short, so I'll just get into one of these other jars. And this seems like an awful lot of starter to use in a recipe for a single loaf. But we're going to follow their recipe. And I will be trying out my own recipe with no yeast in this bread maker as well. Okay, that's it. So that goes in. All right, now I'm going to place the bread pan on my scale, turn it on. It will come on zeroed out. And we need 360 grams or 2.5 cups of bread flour. And 2 teaspoons of yeast. Then we put it back in the machine. And we select the Artisan program, which is program number 7. Now, I don't know if you can see this screen right there, but this says 5 hours and 5 minutes. So, yikes is all I have to say. And so here we go with the mixing. Well, I'm a little puzzled by the 5 hours and 5 minutes, but we'll see. I went online and tried to find a, not a minute by minute, but a segment by segment of what happens during this Artisan program, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So we'll find out. And when the Artisan program ends, it is still dough. If we want to bake it, then we take it out, shape it, put it back in there, and go to bake program and set the timer for 60 minutes for baking. Now, I'm not going to do that. When this is finished and the dough is ready, I'm going to take it out and shape it, and then ultimately we'll be baking it in my own oven. And I will be doing that inside a Dutch oven so that I can capture the moisture and make it a really good loaf. Let's see what this is doing. It's not easy to mix up that levain. It is that sourdough starter. It is really sticky. We'll come back periodically, take a look to see what it's doing. And meanwhile, it'll be 5 hours before we're going to be pulling that dough out. So we'll see you along the way. In any moment, it's going to ring and let us know that 5 hours and 5 minutes has finished. There we have it. So I'm going to get it out. Here's what it looks like. What happened was that it mixed for a good solid 30 minutes to get everything all mixed together. I was wondering if that was going to be successful, and it was. And then it went into a kneading cycle and then a rising cycle. And it repeated that kneading, rising 3 different times over the course of the full 5-hour time. And it's very hard on the top, I guess I should say. It's dried out on the top. Okay, so I'm just going to work this dough for a minute. Work in all these crusty pieces that have dried out on the top. It has been rising for, I would say, an hour. Well, the dough feels good. Now, I want to show you how I shape a round boule. The directions say to, at this point, shape it into a 10-inch boule or a loaf, or you can put it back in and bake it for an hour. So when I do any artisan bread, like sourdough bread, I just bring it around and tuck the edges in on the back side. This is a little bit drier dough than I like. And then, once I get them all tucked in, I will turn it over and I pull the dough toward me, which stretches the dough across the top. And usually it's not this, the dough doesn't break like this. And after I get that tension in place, usually this is very smooth and the top is topped. Well, this isn't. So I'm going with their recipe, so we'll see. Now I'm just going to put this in this basket, cover it in plastic, and it says to let it rest for 20 minutes. Now, if I were doing my own recipe for this step, I would let it proof one last time, but it's already proofed 3 times. So I'm letting it rest the way they call for. And then instead of putting it on a baking sheet as they call for, I am going to use my 4-quart Dutch oven that goes in this oven. Now I bake artisan loaves at 465. Their instructions say 425. I'm going to follow their instructions. I'm going to go ahead and preheat this right now, so this will have plenty of time to get very hot. Jim has to leave. He has an appointment that is, 60 out of town. And he won't be back until late tonight. So when I come back, I will be videoing using either the GoPro, probably not, because I don't know how to put that on a tripod. I will probably be using my iPhone to finish up this video. But in any case, I'll see you when we are ready to put this in the pan in the oven. Here we go without Jim. Here is the bread, and I am quite disappointed in the texture here, with all of these breaks in the skin. I'll explain a little bit later why I think that happened, but right now it has been sitting for 30 minutes, resting for 30 minutes, so we are going to put it in the oven. So the first thing I need to do is put on my heat glove and remove the lid. And then to get it in, I turn it upside down. And I don't slash the top the way some people will, because the underside has all of these junctions where I brought the dough together from all around, and it will open up just like a flower if it acts like my other breads do. So here we go, and we will set the timer for 30 minutes and see what happens. Okay, here's our bread. All right, let's analyze this. I can't give you a very big of a, it's hot. It's pretty, it's very small. Quite a bit smaller than my usual loaves of sourdough bread. It's also, listen to that crust, very hard crust. I think I'm not happy with this at all. It doesn't look anything like it. Smells pretty good. I haven't tasted it yet. We'll do that in a few minutes. But I think what happened with this particular batch is that the starter that I used was thicker than what they probably used when they tested the recipe. I do use a thicker sourdough starter, I guess, I don't know. But I kind of didn't like how it was acting all the way through the process. The dough seemed to be very dry from the very beginning. I did not want to mess with the recipe at all. I wanted to follow it exactly, because then that gives me a baseline of what I will do. I also did not like the fact that it used yeast. I much prefer a pure sourdough bake. So I'm going to break all the rules and I'm going to cut into it right now. Gosh, very thick crust, probably because it was, gotta get something. Probably because it was so dry. I need a hacksaw. I'm not kidding. Okay. Well, it is hard to really judge this crumb. It's still doughy here, and it's already baked 20 minutes longer than was suggested. So I'm just going to take a little taste. The crust is too hard for me to eat. The flavor is good. It has a nice sourdough flavor to it, mild. I like mild sourdough. So I think the way that this needs to be improved is I'm just going to use my own recipe next time. And we'll see how that works. But this is good information, especially for those of you that have the Cuisinart compact unit like mine. I have decided that I do not like the recipe. I don't like the program for artisan bread. To have a 5.5 hour program where it is kneaded and then it rises 3 different times is too much from my perspective. So I would opt to do it by hand before I would do it like that again. What I will do if I use my own recipe in the bread machine, I will not use the artisan program. I will use the dough program, which gets done in 1 hour and 30 minutes after it goes through everything that it needs to. And then I will shape it and bake it just like this. So this was a really good learning experience for me, for all of us who have that Cuisinart. And if you have a thinner sourdough starter, or if you use their recipe, I looked at their recipe, it's also a little bit different than anything I've ever seen before. But their own recipe for a sourdough starter may also work better. It takes 5 days to get theirs to the ripe stage enough to use it. So we're going to call this video good. We've learned a lot, and I'll bring you back sometime when I use my own recipe in the bread machine, and we'll see if that works better. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you at our next video.